wanted to do something with you for a long time around a few of the topics that we're going to talk about. The first one was client ghosting,
Uh-huh.
because this is a thing that I've just been in situations where a thing has happened and then you've kind of been like, would you be open to some context on that? And then you pop in and you just like break the whole thing down in such a way where I'm just like, holy shit, like it's so helpful to know some of the things that I've learned from you. And so I think I just threw it out there to you at some point to be like, we need to do something about client ghosting at some point. And then since then, I'm actually glad that we waited, because now I feel like I'm seeing things in my life daily that are so related to your book, and not even necessarily some friendship things, but
Mm-hmm.
just relationships in general.
Mm-hmm.
And the ways that I am realizing I was taught I was supposed to be in relationships, and how that really causes me to never actually allow people to know me. Um, you know?
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah. So anyways, I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to actually intentionally not be super prepared for this conversation with you, because I wanted to allow the beautiful thing that I always see happen with you, which is I bring a thing up that I'm like, I think I see this thing happening. And you're like, actually,
Oh no.
this is what I noticed.
What's funny is people will tell me I've said things that are like meaningful to them, and I just have no memory. Meaning, like, I know that I do talk a lot.
You
But then I'm like,
actually
oh
don't
cool. That's good
talk a
to
lot.
know.
You
Really?
actually
Okay.
don't talk a lot. You are the
Okay.
kind of person who's like very quiet. You actually remind me a lot of who I was when I was younger, which
Okay.
is you're very quiet. And then when you say something, it's very clear to me that you have been incredibly intentional with what you were about to say. At least that's how it seems to me. It seems like you
But
open your mouth when you have something really poignant to say, and only when it is necessary to like insert yourself in it. And it is just, yeah. So
maybe we need to get drinks sometime then, and we'll expand the narrative of
that's not even a maybe. We
return. We
definitely
definitely do.
need to
Yes.
get drinks sometime.
Definitely.
Okay. So I think okay, let's just start with the client ghosting, because we got to
Sure.
just get it off the,
Yeah. By the way.
we got to make sure that that happens. So
Yeah.
something that I learned from you is that and I'm going to put this in my terms, and then I'm going to allow you to come in and be like, let me actually explain what's happening here. Something that I've learned from you is that there's a thing that can happen in relationships with clients, especially when you're in a coaching relationship or in some kind of support role,
Mm-hmm.
where you might think that seeing somebody in like an initial call that you have with them, or in any kind of call that you have with them, really seeing them and really noticing like what it is that they need in that moment, and just kind of going in and being like, here's what I noticed, and offering that, you would think that that would be like, that was going to blow that person's mind and make them be like, you are the person that I want to work with forever and
Mm-hmm.
ever and ever. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
that much, but some of
I
us
mean,
have thought.
don't we? Isn't that our fantasy though? Don't we
Right,
want?
right.
Yeah.
But that actually sometimes that has the opposite effect, which is that that person kind of runs away from it.
Well, I think I remember this where what I do remember what I said about this. So maybe I'm like, okay, I'll try to pull it back up. But like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes, whenever we're looking at change, we both want it and don't want it, because we
Yeah.
want security and we want familiarity. And so then if part of our profession is offering change to people in their business, in their lives, in their mental health, you're constantly walking that line of like push pull of, you're inviting someone to something new, and they're seeking you because they want something new. And that's like the agreement and the structure, and you can be as clear as possible about it. And I don't know, I think I want to say like sometimes that just happens.
Yeah.
So that's just like the baseline of it is we both want change and we don't want change. And so
Mm-hmm.
then if someone actually does see that you would be a great fit,
Mm-hmm.
and then for whatever reason, because they're now out of the picture, we don't know why they left.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems common enough in across industries
Yeah.
of like helping profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, really, I've just had so many scenarios where I've seen clients of mine really feel devastated by the fact that they thought they had this connection with a client, and then the client either said they wanted to work with them and never responded to an email again,
Mm-hmm.
or was in a program with them or a relationship with them and literally just like stopped, either stopped
Yep.
showing up and didn't say anything, or said, actually I need to, like, out of seemingly out of nowhere, I need to end this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much sense once I heard you kind of explain that, to be like, oh yeah, like there's no way of knowing what
Mm-hmm.
is going on for that person. It's not like in every scenario, and that's not what we're saying. Like, it's not like in every scenario, if somebody stops working with you or doesn't respond to you, it's because of this.
Totally. Yeah.
But there's certainly situations where it's not that you did anything wrong. It's not that you should have whatever. It's actually that, like, for that person, they have their own process, and like they might just be in a place where they're not actually ready to face whatever kind of transformation could come from what they might see being like almost a rapid kind of thing that would come about from working with you, or from facing the things that they're recognizing they might have to change to work with you, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And being able to point that out or notice it even for myself sometimes, or even have it as a possibility, not like oh, that's what happened, but be like, oh, it could have been this, to
Yeah.
me is like really, really helpful.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, I feel like there's two questions here, because there's like ghosting of, and I also want to just put a disclaimer in. I don't have, I mean, do I like being ghosted? Absolutely not. I also, like, I don't want to make it a moral judgment. So
Yes.
like, I want to use it as a word in this conversation. So I'm just like, hey, if anyone out there has ghosted their whoever,
Yes.
it's a functional word of like, oh, you were gone now suddenly without explanation.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's two categories here. You see like the initial call, you're offering that change, and then you never hear from them again, even though you think there's like this good connection and like they're moving forward in the process. You feel like you're both a good fit for each other. And then there's the scenario of you've been working with somebody and then they just don't show up to their calls anymore, or whatever capacity of that. And maybe they give you a little bit of information, or they give you information that you feel is out of nowhere, or no info and just a cancellation. So I want to notice like those feel like a little bit different categories
Totally.
too of like experiences. But to come back to what you said, it's really vulnerable to be in the work of change with people.
Yeah.
It's vulnerable to allow someone to help you in that. Like, it's vulnerable to show up for that in yourself, like as a client. And it's also vulnerable as a coach, or as a mentor, as, a therapist, or whatever other title in the person to person field that we're talking about, because you care, you give a damn. You wouldn't be in this work otherwise.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, something was coming up as you were talking, which is I'm really glad that you said like this isn't a moral judgment, because actually what it's done for me is allowed me to understand why somebody might. It's not actually, in some instances, I'm not going to lie, it makes me feel better to think that it's an option that that's what happened. To be like, oh, totally. Maybe I was just so like, I just met them right where they were, and it was so obvious to them what would happen from working with me. Of course I've gone there. But actually, what I think it's allowed me to do is just have some more, leave some space for different people's processes to be different and not make it about me. Which is so important, and I think really gets lost in coaching spaces where it's very focused on transformation and results. Because what you're supposed to do as a coach is you're supposed to be able to say, this is what I do for clients, this is where I get you. And You're supposed to be able to walk them through, bring them through a process, and that's where they land. And that means that you did a good job. And
Yep.
what gets lost in that is that that doesn't account for not just different circumstances. I think we talk sometimes about different circumstances, people having different financial circumstances or different lived experiences. That's certainly a part of it, but also just like their inner landscape of what they're actually going through when they go through change. And how, if we make it about us and the results that we get people to, we are in danger of losing the part where it just might take people a different route to get, or a different amount of time to get where they're going to go. And this is something that Nicole Lewis-Keeber, who is a therapist and works on trauma and entrepreneurship and is going to be on the show at some point, was telling me when we did an interview for my last show. She had said something about sometimes she's working with coaches and they're really frustrated by a certain client because they're not progressing in the way that they would like to see them progress. And she was like, you actually can't force somebody. There's not only is there often just nothing, it's not within your power, but if you try to force somebody to experience a change, to work within your timeline to make you a good coach, you're actually like trampling over like their experience and how they deal with things and their process. And this to me nests into that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think about the idea of, what are the maybe common ways that we deal with being ghosted as a coach, or as, like, what are we what's the story that we are telling ourselves? Are we telling ourselves like we are a failure? Or, I will tend to run through like my own, like, gosh, what could I have done better? And I think there's like, that's definitely healthy. Like you need to have ability to look at how you, why there was a sudden disconnect and what you did that contributed to that, not just for the future of your business, but also just for your continued work with whoever you're going to sit with.
Yeah.
But it's, sorry, I lost my own train of thought, but the frustration aspect and the stuckness, I wonder if that comes as like a common theme for people when they find a sudden ending with a client. Because I don't know if you can jump in there.
No, I think that in the conversation that I was having about that with Nicole, it was kind of like, and I guess I'm drawing a parallel. It's like sometimes it's, and I've watched coaches do this where they see a client kind of, I'm going to use really what I would, not terminology that I would actually use, but the way that I see people thinking about it, like this client bailed out right at the part where things were going to get hard because they just didn't want to do the work. Or this client just isn't progressing in the way that they could be. And it's so frustrating because they're just not taking action.
Oof.
Yeah. Why did you oof?
I just think about how much easier it is for us to accuse ourselves or other people when we are going through something painful.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think that this conversation about what someone might be experiencing that would make them maybe decide, sometimes not even consciously. I mean, we have so much shit going on. I have so many emails. Like, there is no way that I have not left somebody hanging over the past few months. And I just can't remember it because the communication is constant. And so it's not even always conscious. It might just be that somebody's like, they saw this, it was a lot. You go back to your life. And having this conversation with you about why this might happen, to me, leaves so much space for us to just open things up a little bit and be like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't actually that anyone did anything wrong necessarily. It's just a fucking human experience.
Yeah. Like breathing room for the sudden endings of things. Yeah. And like, it also sounds like really liberating, as somebody who's working with people vulnerably from that side of, offering the support and the care, I think that you would probably agree with me. Most of the people that you work with are probably a little bit harder on themselves. Like they would
Yes.
skew towards that side, less towards
Yes.
the side of like, oh, they weren't just ready or whatever.
Yes.
Like they're going to take it all on.
Yeah.
And we actually won't be able to show up well and authentically if we're not honestly looking at what happened. And if it was just they're going back to their life, they looked at it and in one ear out the other, like moving on, like from an initial call, or even, somewhere in the middle, like something else that in their landscape, as you said, is like disrupting in the way or whatever, and there's not an ability for them to communicate that and actually has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Like, what are we, how can we have a little bit more relief
Yeah.
for ourselves? Because I mean, gosh, it sucks, especially when you're self-employed too, like stage driven.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're talking about this, something that I am also like seeing a parallel to in it, and I think that this is something that, I mean, ghosting is definitely something that you talk about in your book, but there's, and this is really the reason why I wanted to make sure that we talked, because like I was saying, I mean, I just see so many relational dynamics play out that I'm just like, oh, like it's like 17 times a day. I'm like, oh, how to be a bad friend. Oh, how to be a bad friend. Oh, like I just see it everywhere now. And I think that part of that is because in my own therapy, I'm just really working on like being more authentic with people and just learning myself too. And something that you point out and that I really love about your work, and that I think we see happen in the scenario that we were just talking about, and we also see it happen just in general in the business development space, is how quick we are to just put people in categories.
Yeah.
Like if a client, if you have a call with a client and a potential client, and then they say they want to work with you and then they don't, it can be really self-protective and make you feel better to be like, well, that person just doesn't want to do the work, or that person has some shit to deal with, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, it's just like the tone of it, even like it wasn't me, it was them, because it has to be somebody, right? Like somebody always has to be like at fault, or like the wrong one, the bad one, whatever. And then also what happens when we look, because I very much believe that like we need to open some space for different people to do business differently. But there's also a thing that happens in that where you could see somebody do a thing that you don't agree with, and suddenly they're in the unethical category. Which is not to say that people don't do fucked up shit.
Yeah.
But it is to say that just because somebody is doing something differently than maybe how you would do things, I don't know that we need to draw these clear distinctions between the people who are doing business in a good way and the people who are doing business in a bad way. Or I thought this person was good and then I found out they were bad, sort of.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just wondering, like, I don't know, as I say that, like, is there anything that's like popping up for you that you're like, oh my God, you have so much to say. I already know. I just need to shut up.
I love more context in building it out, because, this is like I don't know, a buffet of like fun topics to go over. So I move my hair out of the way. I'm like, okay. I'm like, do we want like a little like, and now I feel like we should have a little theme song, like a little fun moment for psycho ed.
Yes, please.
I am obsessed with psychoanalysis, and it's like, not just from getting my degree, like I would read those books as a hobby, because that's how you can then go down a rabbit hole of what's wrong with me. But like it's like, what a shame she's fucked in the head. There's our first Taylor quote of the day. So I think what you've just illustrated there is we put people in these categories of good and bad. And essentially what that is it's an unconscious defense structure.
Yeah.
So we always have somewhere to go so that we can be protected from the uncertainty of nuance. And it's like a very human thing to do. So we're not bad if we do it, and we don't need to stop trying to do it, but how can we actually bring it forward into our awareness so we can notice we're doing it? And then we get to make the choice about we get to make value judgments and statements about people, but we also get to understand why we're doing that. Are we doing it to protect ourselves, or do we actually need to do it so that we are acting in integrity and appropriately evaluating the situation? So splitting is a function of the mind that we have as an unconscious defense structure. And by that, I mean, and this is where like, even in saying this, I'm like, I still don't believe it's true. Like it's unconscious. So again, we don't fucking know that we're doing it when we're doing it, no matter what. So if we can see ourselves when we are like, oh, I put these in categories, or, oh, I'm saying like, well, they just had shit to do, or I'm telling myself, I'm actually terrible at this. And I don't, who do I think I am? You might look back at that like, oh, wow, this morning I was splitting. I was putting things in this black and white space because I needed to be safe.
Yeah.
And then, do I need to do that to be safe? No, I can actually work with what's happened here with some more space.
Yeah.
With some more freedom for interpretation, with some more curiosity towards myself, curiosity towards the other. And then actually you'll find newness there and more data than you would otherwise. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And as you're saying that, I'm just kind of going back into like, so I recently had an experience where I was seeing a person who I really deeply respect do something that I was like, okay, I really, really respect this person. And I know that they would never intend to do what I see they're doing right now. And it was one of the first times, true, I am 33. This is like embarrassing that this is one of the first times, but it is truly one of the first times.
I disagree, but continue.
Thank you. Truly one of the first times that I was able to go, oh, wow, this person who I have so much respect for, who I know is so skilled at what they do, and who would never want to do this intentionally, is doing this. And I don't have to choose between shutting up and being okay with it or putting them in the category of, oh, you're not who I thought you were. I'm out. And that middle ground of, I'm going to maintain space for the respect and for the benefit of the doubt and for the compassion that I have for you, and for knowing that you actually are deeply skilled, and also for the fact that in this moment, you're doing a thing that is not actually in integrity. And I have to say something because I care about this relationship and because I want to be here, is not something that I, at least, and I don't think most people, were ever taught how to do.
Yeah, no, we weren't. In fact, we were actively conditioned and taught not to do it.
Yeah. Say more about that.
I mean, that's my other like favorite book that I found towards the end of my process of writing How to Be a Bad Friend, but it was just research done on adolescent girls in the 90s, published, by the way, by the same, if you're a fan of Women Who Run with the Wolves, I feel like that's, a lot of people love that book. It's published by the same division of publishing house and in the same year. So I call them like sisters. They're actually sitting on my desk right now. But the book's called Meeting at the Crossroads. And it's just about how girls are taught that they cannot have open conflict.
Yeah.
And you have to silence yourself. But actually the place where literally we develop our voice and our capacity for our own identity and our ability to express and communicate that is only happens in conflict.
Yes.
Which, if you think about it, makes sense, because conflict is where two people do not agree. And therefore you have one point of view and another point of view. And then if you have two same points of view, then that's also fine, but like there's no uniqueness there. It's homogenous, essentially.
Yes.
So you can't actually develop yourself without difference. So and then to your point though, to step into this middle space of not going, okay, I thought you were good and you're actually not, or like just shutting yourself away, it's a huge risk because of all of this societal conditioning that to address a problem means you then become the problem as opposed to there being separate things. So good on you.
I'm sitting here like smiling with my eyes closed because my only other call of the day so far was therapy.
Oh, hey.
And do you want to know what I opened therapy with today?
Oh, absolutely.
I was talking about the situation that I just told you about. I had told my therapist about this situation because it was just not because it was a huge deal actually, but because it was a big deal for me because of the fact that I was exploring that, oh, I really have a tendency to think that my only options are to shut myself down or cut this person off. It's a big deal for me. And it did feel like a huge risk. And it is a huge risk. I think that we have a tendency to be like, you're going to do the right thing and then everything is going to work out, because actually you might be surprised to hear how people are going to respond to you, which is just a way to be like, oh no, it's actually all you. If you just handled things differently, right? That's actually not true.
Yeah.
Like if you decide that you're going to handle things you have no idea how the person is going to respond. And it was incredibly risky and it was incredibly emotional for me. Because again, not a huge deal externally, but a huge deal for me. And I said to my therapist today, I go, okay, so we got past that thing. And now I just keep bumping up against, why did you have to be so difficult? That's the new story, is like, that didn't really change all of that much to have that conversation. So why did you have to bring it up then? Why be so difficult? You're just difficult.
Yeah.
And so when you were saying, when you bring it up, it makes you the problem. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing to myself. No one's doing that to me. I'm doing that to myself. In situations, people do that to people. In this situation, I was lucky enough that the person did not do that to me and actually was very gracious in the way that they accepted it. But, and I'm doing it to myself probably because of the ways that it actually was done to me so many times before. But
yeah, I was going to say there's that wiring is like, that's from something.
Yes.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly where that's from, but
yeah,
this
there you go. Yeah.
is not, that's what the first hour of today was for.
Well, but I think to the point of like stepping into that middle space, you're also rewriting, however many stories you have been made to be the problem for bringing up the fact that there is a problem.
Yeah.
So in a sense, like when you say not a lot changed, like actually, like a lot did change because you showed up for you.
Yeah.
And this relationship and whatever setting like of the issue being addressed. But then if it has this like domino effect of where, I think it's like easier to, it feels a little gaslighty sometimes to me because of all the times I've spoken up about problems and then it has not gone well.
Yes.
And still believing it matters for my own sake and my own story and my own voice and whatever I'm speaking up about, whoever that impacts. But also like there's something going on that we can't see.
Yeah.
Like it's changing a larger narrative to do
this. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that to be, I guess to kind of like put a point on this, it's like the reason that I really, really wanted to have this conversation with you as one of the first episodes of this new show is because at least what I've learned for myself, and I would love to hear if you have thoughts on this, is that I really needed to learn how to give people some amount of grace in holding them accountable to things, doing both, like being in the both and in that middle space. I've also learned how to do that for me. Like they're so like tied up in each other, right? Like the standards that I put on myself, I'm casting on other people. The way that I'm interacting with other people that's ultimately like one of the standards that I'm putting on me. And when we talk about this concept of make your business work for you or do business in a way that works for you, and we're existing in this space where there are so many judgments being cast all the time about the right way to do business and the wrong way to do business, or this person is unethical because of this person's slimy because of that. So again, sometimes they are, but sometimes it's like, we need to learn how to look at other people and understand there might be a million things going on that you know nothing about that
Mhm.
inform why that person's doing that. And likewise, you might decide for yourself to do things in a very different way from how the quote unquote good ones told you to do it.
Mhm.
And I want that for people. Like, I want people to be able to lean into themselves a bit more and be like, I'm going to kind of invent my own way of going about this without feeling like there are these clear categories that I need to kind of like exist in. Or
Yep.
I said that to put a point on it, and I totally didn't put a point on it, but
Well,
yeah.
I think you did.
Okay.
I'll field it back. I like, as if we kind of maybe round out the client ghosting,
Yeah.
what I hear you saying is actually like you had this opportunity to ghost in essence, either ghost yourself by disavowing your experience and staying in
Oh my God, self
wherever you
ghosting.
were.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And something I say about like our experience is nothing is going to change unless your experience matters.
Yeah.
So it's one of the not, you're not making it the focus of everything, but it is important data that if you're not listening to it, you're going nowhere. So you could ghost yourself, or you could ghost the person, you know, that
Yeah.
is in this scenario you're talking about. And you didn't, and you showed up in the middle space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's two things about that. Like when you are ghosted by a client,
Mm-hmm.
there's some breakdown in communication that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's all in them. Maybe you've created the container where actually you do need to actually be real honest with yourself to say, like, actually, I have created a good container here, and I'm just not going to know what happens, but I'm not going to participate in accusing myself or accusing them.
Yeah.
And sit with the discomfort of that.
Yeah.
But there's a middle space there where now nothing will be, unless somehow they come back around, essentially.
Yeah.
So to come back to what you're saying, you showed up in that middle space. And I think the second thing that also does is it makes it more painful than if you're ever left there. Because if you took a chance on it, why won't somebody else?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, yeah. I was hanging there for a minute, and I was like a mess.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think I wanted to pull into this conversation is okay, so putting it in those terms of when you're in a situation where you could either ghost yourself or ghost that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or you could show up in the middle, and what it feels like to not be met there. There's a thing that is at risk there, which is not just the relationship with that person, but potentially your entire shared community. And I
Yep.
know that community loss is something that you talk a lot about, that you've experienced.
Yep.
And I think that it would be really helpful to have a conversation about this, because so many of the support programming for small business owners, including my own, by the way, is
Mm-hmm.
in groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that people give themselves enough credit for how risky it can feel to show up as yourself when you're in a space where it feels like you have created you belong with this group of people. And if you show up authentically as yourself, or if you show up in that middle space with somebody in that group, what could potentially happen if everyone thinks a thing about you and now you lose your whole fucking community? That's like a huge deal. And it's playing
Yes.
out in support spaces in the business world.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I guess you would have an eye on that, but as somebody that's been with your group for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, I'm sitting here going, like, so what do you think the magic sauce is, Brooke? Because this is like, you cultivate community that I've been a part of and felt able to show up authentically in, and been able to do a lot
I mean,
because of.
that makes me
So
incredibly happy to hear, Kat, but honestly, I don't know how much that came from. I feel really lucky, I think in part by the group of people that we
yeah.
have.
Mm-hmm.
I feel incredibly lucky for how things played out, because I don't think that I'm very aware of it now because of the experiences that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that I was like really particularly skilled
Yeah.
in doing that.
But maybe that's where like coming back to showing up authentically. But
Yeah.
the risk, I think the thing is there's not a guarantee that goes with it. So maybe like I think I don't like the measure of luck, true.
Mhm.
But you show up authentically, and that I think that there gets to be a crossroads when we are encountering someone who's being authentic.
Yeah.
You know, like we get to like join them there or we don't. Or
Mhm.
I think, I don't know. I'm going to get out in the weeds, but I also think
Get
of
in the
people who show
weeds.
up.
The weeds are
Get in
great.
the weeds. Okay, the weeds are great. So if we was a psycho ed point two of the day,
Yes.
um, I think all of us actually like deep down really want authenticity,
Mhm.
because we want to be known and we
Mhm.
want to also know and connect. And we can't do that because if we're not being who we are, there might be some sort of
Yeah.
fake connection. And again, I'm not making a value judgment. It's just not satiating the place in us that does need connection for whatever purpose. But like, if we come back to like business, um, the vulnerability of entrepreneurship, you like, damn, you're on the roller coaster all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So the psycho ed piece of it being, because we want that, if we are not showing up for that for ourselves and we see someone else doing it, the other unconscious defense thing we'll do is find a way to mar that, whether we diminish or we undercut, we do something that will make that person that we are, and this is the function of envy, less enviable to us so that we feel safer. And I see this happen a lot. I would say, I don't want to gender things entirely, but like in a white supremacist capitalist society,
Mhm.
that men have been privileged to be able to kind of go at it with each other. And I
Yep.
don't know, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily health, but there
Mhm.
is something to our need to engage each other in difference and in conflict and in tension,
Mhm.
that hasn't necessarily been afforded to anyone else of a non-male gender identity, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it really is. It's just been so interesting to me to kind of do my own healing work around so much of the stuff that you talk about, just being able to show up fully in relationships and know that like real relationship, like exactly what you said, like real relationship and growth in relationship and knowing each other comes through that conflict. It's being able to meet each other in disagreement and being able to do my work on that while I've been in business and leading people and running groups and all of that has been fascinating to me because I realize it actually has happened really rapidly for me, where I can look back on the ways that I thought about things a few years ago and be like, oh my gosh, you were so confused. Like, that was like you were so confused about what you were doing and about how all this works and stuff. And that's like, that's okay. I have
Yeah.
compassion for myself in that moment. But as I witness this for myself, and then I look more at the space that we're in, I see all of these setups that I do think reinforce, of course, reinforce this dynamic of like, this is how we're supposed to interact with in relationships, set up in coaching relationships or in different programs or whatever, especially programs that are supposed to foster like deep connection between people and don't seem to
Mhm.
acknowledge like that actually sets up a dynamic where it's actually going to be a lot harder for people to hold you accountable to things or speak up, because now there's an entire community around this that they
Mhm.
feel really attached to, and
Yeah.
that's not that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, I think, or at least we
Mhm.
should understand what we're doing.
Well, I think it's a fantasy. We have a fantasy of community that a
Yeah.
lot of us are working with. Like, I mean, I don't know if your community is based on the fact that you have community. I don't know that like the clique exists because people are outside it.
Yes.
So, and again, that's like how wonked our whole, world is. I mean, I guess I shouldn't generalize that much, but like, individualist mindset, is that the fantasy of community is not what it actually is.
Say more on that.
Well, I'm going to get out of my depth quickly, but if you look at like, so I'll just say like, read in indigenous authors. There's popular book, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, talking about like our relationship with community. She doesn't talk about this, but so I'm going to relate it back to her real quick. Like we want to go out with our friends, we want to hang out, we want to have fun, we want to like collaborate, and we want to like, there's always some sort of like give and get
Yeah.
in it. And I think there's health to that, in that we want to make sure that there's mutuality, but like, where does that get defined? What do we do when we feel like we're giving too much? What do we do with our insecurity when we feel like not giving enough? And that's very like exchange rate basis. Like, again, unconsciously, I don't think we're not, this isn't all like, we're not like, okay, I spent 5 minutes talking, you spent 5 minutes talking. But that's not, we're not connected to the natural world. We're not connected to our community's needs. A lot of our things, like, I mean, my closest friends do not live close to me. And so there's ways that I'm also like, I'm not making a value judgment on it. It's just noticing how disconnected we are from everything else. Our community groups are, not multifaceted. We tend to be, within our own class, socioeconomically. So we talk about community. I think the particularity and the focus is good to where you could be around people where you have enough similarity so that you can have like a resonance that will let you grow and create that like inspiration and the ability to support, if that makes sense. But community as a whole is so much wider than just being with a group of people who are all doing the same thing that you're doing.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So that's and so then to come back to like the Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about like this lake that she has like by her house that has become overgrown and has like, I don't think it was toxic, but it was just like the wrong kind of algae was in it, and it was affected of like this whole thing. So she cleans it all out, and I think she has some neighbors come, and like there's just a sense of a way of being that we are so far from when it comes to community that that's kind of where I think the wider picture of it is. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think, we're speculating, I'm asking you to speculate. So what you say to this, I'm responsible for this, for setting you up for this.
Okay. All right. Okay.
What I'm thinking though is like, so I'm hearing you say all of this and I'm like, yes. And in groups that I've been a part of, community spaces that I've been in, and how terrifying it can feel to be like, maybe I don't, what if I do this thing, does it mean that I'm going to lose everybody here? Or if someone makes a judgment about me, is that going to spread through this group of people, and then no one's going to like me anymore, or no one's going to want to be like my friend anymore, or whatever? Like, I think about how strong that fear of losing a group of people is. And I wonder, because the reason that I brought this up was to kind of point to, like, if you exist in these online, quote unquote, online community spaces where you actually create a sense of belonging with people and whatever, like, I think that you should give yourself I think we should all give ourselves some grace for, and then those of us running communities should really pay attention to the dynamics that play out. And I guess I wonder, with everything that you just said, I'm like, when we find a quote unquote online community space where we're connected to people, if part of the reason that it feels so like such a big deal is in part because of the fact that many of us are lacking actual community.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
So this like this one little taste of it is like charged, because it's like, oh my gosh, like, what is this, and
yeah. Well, I think actually I haven't thought of this literally until you're saying it right now. And my book, kind of where I'm leading the reader is what shaped your friendship dynamics and the connection to your attachment and family dynamics, and the ways that when you don't recognize that you didn't get what you needed. Yeah. You go and look for that in other people. Again, human, good, necessary, how we heal. We need other people. Like, the moment that I figure out how we don't, like, you'll be the first to know. Like, I'm still trying to do it on my own. Okay. I'm committed. So anyhow, sorry, I was laughing at myself here. Is that like these wounds from our parents, like this unconditional love wound, like we're actually looking for friends to love us unconditionally while not actually simultaneously being on the hook to do that for them.
Yes.
Or vice versa. We're providing unconditional love for somebody who actually has no interest in returning it to us because there's something off there where like that isn't a need we're meant to meet with each other. But it's so charged because we're finally seeing someone who is connecting and accepting us for no reason other than they just like us.
Yep.
And so if you tell yourself that your mom liked you, but deep down inside you, there's parts of you that are like, she didn't like me, then you meet someone who does like you, it's that charge. So to come back to your point about community, I think there's that similar thing of like, we are really, right, we have to, I think we need to confront our lack of community, the true lack of it. We do need to find it where we can and notice how much of our need for community we're actually funneling into a place that can't hold it. Can't. And how do we sit with that, our unmet needs? How do we sit with that lack well together? Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. I just keep taking very deep breaths over here because you keep saying things and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so true. I think this is going to be one of those ones that people are going to, I would highly recommend a re-listen. I don't normally listen to my podcast episodes after I put them out. And this one I think I'm going to listen to because I think that there's so much in what you're saying that I truly am like, I mean, some people will see my face because I am recording the video of this, but I'm kind of like, looking at you like every word that comes out of your mouth, I'm like, and what's the end of the story, Kat? And then what? Like, I just feel like you are just really explaining some things that are, I'm slowly catching up.
Well, I thanks.
Yeah.
I'm glad to, and also that's again, if we talk about difference and we talk about connection and relationship, I'm able to be connected to my voice in this conversation with you because one, my body's settled, and also you're someone also connected to your voice, and you and I have similarities. We also have differences, and so there's a cultivation of what I'm able to say is a testament to questions you're asking and conversation we're having.
Kat.
So
well, I think that you are truly fucking brilliant. I really do. I am telling everybody that I meet to read your book because again, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just am seeing it everywhere. And I think that it's really powerful. And I also just, there are a few people who, there's not many people who fall into this category. Look, we're categorizing people now. There's not many people who fall into this category. You squarely fall into this category for me and a few other peers of mine and people who I know who I look at the work that you do and I truly am struck by how seriously you take it and the integrity that you do it with and just the depth of it. Like your work is beyond you trying to establish yourself, and it's beyond you trying to look smart, and it's beyond all of those things that I don't think a lot of people are like. I don't think that that's the main driver for most people, but it's clearly a huge driver for lots of folks. And for you, one of the things that I've just seen always be non-negotiable for you is that you're thinking really, really deeply and intentionally about what you're doing and that you're showing up aligned with that. It's like an absolute core to what I've witnessed. And I just honestly am honored to know you. And I think that you're brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to actually follow that up. Thank you. I received that. I want to come back to something you said earlier that I realized actually like don't want to leave this episode without noting, because you said a few times and we actually haven't touched on it. Like, what if you say the thing and you lose everyone?
Yeah.
What if you show up and it doesn't work out? Because there is not a formula. I think there's ways we can fuck it up. There's ways we could fuck it up and it could still work out.
Yeah.
But are you going to show up or not with your own authenticity in difference and in conflict? And does that mean you might lose your community? And I guess I wanted to come back to that to say, yes, it might mean that. And it might mean that repeatedly. I continue to find myself at those crossroads, and I'm kind of realizing, oh, this might be a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
Not that I'll never belong, or not that I'm maybe not repeating some patterns or things like that. And also like to take what you've just said and offer it to the viewer. It's humiliating to lose your community
Yeah.
because people then categorize you and make judgments about you. And yes, the rumor mill still works. It
Yeah.
still works. And I guess in whoever's listening, like, will you continue to offer yourself dignity? Because I've been repeatedly humiliated again and again and again, and I wrote a book about it. And one of the things I think that has come to make the most difference is that I will offer myself dignity, and I will continue to show up for myself with dignity, and with honesty and authenticity, and looking at my own failures. But you can offer yourself dignity even if no one else will.
Mhm.
So, and you also don't have to take the risk, but I hope you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And if you're hearing this and you're like, how? Like, what are you talking about? Kat has a practice and you can work with Kat one-on-one.
yes, you
In
can.
addition to reading the book.
Mhm.
And I mean, again, everyone's heard me say it. I think that you take the space that you hold incredibly seriously. And if anyone's listening to this and thinking this is just earth shattering, you should go and find Kat's work. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes and all of that. And yeah, Kat, I'm so grateful
Thanks.
that we did this. Thank you so much for
No,
being
thank
here.
you
This
so
was
much.
fantastic.
No, thank you. Thanks for the invitation.